This month's theme is sanctuary, so I thought it'd be interesting to ask if there's a person or place that feels like a sanctuary to you. So if there's I know there's an outdoor space that you like, Sarah. So if you have some volunteers, they want to share about a place or a person that makes you feel safe and is a sanctuary in your life, I'd love to know about those. Who wants to go first? Yeah, go ahead, Lindsay.
Nature is a sanctuary for me, very much so. Anything where I can't see anything man-made. That's like where I'm at. And my yoga mat too, very much so. That's something that can be a sanctuary anywhere.
Yeah, for me, so I'm originally from Kentucky. That's where I was born and raised. Sarah knows that I'm a very proud Kentuckian. So that's like what feels like home to me. Like just being in the state, anywhere, any place, it just feels culturally and emotionally and spiritually, just like feels like home and feels special. Missouri is my second home now, but it's not quite the same as the bluegrass. But you want to share something, Sarah?
Well, you were obviously there.
Oh,
my family
okay.
for sure. Family for sure, and then actually part of the reason why I had reached out to Richard was because Cooper's had kind of become a sanctuary for us over the pandemic. So yeah, that's a really special place to us for sure.
I love that.
I'll just piggyback off that, not to give you another transition to Richard, but I would say the stage was one of the first sanctuaries for me,
Yeah.
and they both happen to be ones that you used to own, so.
Oh, I love that. It's really special. Anyone else like to share? Hey, go ahead.
Yeah, my name's Matt Bear. I'm super happy to be here. My sanctuary would be being out in nature, not being around other people, and while doing watercolor paintings or sketching or
Cool.
stuff. So, plein air.
I love that. Yeah, I think my husband's also favorite place to be is where there's literally no one else. Kylie, honey. Anyone else want to share? Okay.
I'll share one. I will say the movie theater is a sanctuary for me. My family spent a lot of time going to movies growing up, and so I'm the type of person that will go to a movie by myself. If I'm feeling anxious, it's a good way to just get away and kind of escape for a little while.
I love going to the movies alone. It's like
Yeah.
so freeing. I don't know why. You're not talking during the movie anyways, so
Mhm.
it doesn't matter if you're doing it yourself. Yeah. Anyone else want to share? No pressure if not. We can just move on. So if you do not know where you are at Creative Mornings. So thank you all so much for being here. I see lots of new faces, so we're excited to have all of you. If you're not already following us on social media, this is like the place to find out when and what. Mike, our social media guru in the back, has been managing that for us as of late. And so any kind of community news or events, things to attend, or just ways to connect to others in the community, our socials are a great place to find that. We also meet every third Friday in this exact space. So if you're wondering when we ever meet, we usually announce a couple weeks ahead of time depending on if we have a speaker lined up. Sometimes that can be a little challenging, so bear with us. Sarah's crushing it in that area, so we should see you next month on the third Friday if you plan to come. If you didn't know, Creative Mornings is a global organization, so there are chapters all over the world that meet at least one Friday a month, all discussing the same global theme, just pulling a speaker from their local community. So there are over 200 chapters, about 27,000 attendees. It's pretty incredible. So if you ever want to check out Creative Mornings website and you aren't able to come here, we put all of our recordings up online, or if you want to check out what's happening in another city, they always post their talks online too. So if there's something or someone that you're interested in hearing from, you can do that. So we have a global sponsor. So if you aren't aware, we don't make any money doing these events. This is all volunteer-based, donation-based. 4th Street donates their space to us. We provide the donuts out of our own pocket, and our speakers do not get paid. They're here simply to provide a service and a gift to our community. So thank you, Richard. Unless Sarah did pay you. I didn't pay you.
In conversation, maybe with that.
So MailChimp provides all the resources that we need in terms of sharing assets, website management, all of that. so they're our global sponsor. They also do a project each month, and this month's project is called All in a Day's Work, and so it is a kind of a claymation 12-episode series you can find on their website. It's an animated series of comedy shorts revealing the ups and downs and sometimes painful truths of being an entrepreneur or a small business owner, and they do really great work. If you've never interacted with MailChimp outside of email newsletter, they have some really cool stuff. So this is their project for this month. Secondarily, I wanted to just flag, like, if you come to these, you're likely to meet someone you've never met before. You get to make a new friend. I know I've met a dozen new people just by doing this over the last couple of years, but also bring a friend. So the only way we're ever going to grow our chapter is if you tell a friend, bring a friend. Again, it's always going to be free. It's always accessible to any and all people who want to come. So there shouldn't be a barrier to entry there unless you're not a morning person. So I am a morning person, so it's easy for me, but if it's hard for you to get out of bed, I think you'll always be happy that you came. So I don't know of anyone that's ever regretted making the decision to come and just be a part of our community in a different way. All right. Another announcement here is about field trips. So I don't want to pick on Sarah. I always pick on Sarah when it comes to field trips because she's our member who's attended a lot of these. And so what they do is there are virtual field trips where you can check out a new space or a skill that you'd like to learn, and they do these globally. So you can sign up for a field trip in New York City and find out about a creative space, and they take you virtually into a space or develop a new skill. I did a watercolor one not that long ago, which was really interesting. So again, these are also free, so if you're snowed in this winter, as we likely are going to be soon, these are really good opportunities to do something a little bit different out of the box. And if you would like to volunteer with us, we have a very small but mighty team. We've added a couple of new folks, had some folks roll off the team. The commitment is about 5 hours a month in terms of what we're asking you to do, or showing up and just being here and telling a friend. So if you have the time and are willing to be a part of our team and to help us spread the word, we really, really appreciate that. You can just email us at columbia@creativemornings.com, and we'd love to plug you in somewhere. Okay, before we introduce Richard as our speaker, we always like to read the Creative Mornings Manifesto just to set the stage for what we're doing today. So I always ask Mike to read these for us because you don't want to read it today. You just read it in like a normal voice.
You don't have to do
It doesn't have to be Shakespearean, okay?
Now I want to see it shake.
But it does, by the way.
I mean, I would settle for just like a very monotone reading.
It's like, give it up, man.
You don't even need the microphone. I'm just
It's
gonna-
funny, we were setting this up earlier, and I forgot we had a microphone. I didn't even know we had it.
I'm just gonna get out of the
There were
way.
no microphones in Shakespeare's day.
Back in our bear.
Yeah. No, I'm gonna do it.
I'm just
gonna
gonna,
do it.
back it up.
Everyone's creative. A creative life requires bravery and action, honesty, and hard work. We're here to support you, celebrate with you, and encourage you to make the things you love. We believe in the power of community. We believe in giving a damn. We believe in face-to-face connections and learning from others, jazz hands, virtual claps, and virtual snaps. We bring together people who are driven by passion and purpose, confident that they will inspire one another and inspire change in neighborhoods and cities around the world. Everyone is welcome.
For those of you who don't know, that was a very tame version. It's gone wild before. Alright, so this month's theme is sanctuary. I'm gonna tell you a little bit about that. So you can stop running now, you are safe here. A sanctuary offers protection to those who are vulnerable, those who are fleeing violence, those who have been cast off and told there is no place for them here. Even animals whose habitats have disappeared. Here is a place where you can finally lay your head down and rest. So this month's chapter was chosen by our Sheffield chapter. So each chapter gets to choose a theme across the course of the year. The exploration of sanctuary was done by Lisa Maltby, illustrating the theme, and then MailChimp is presenting this theme on behalf of Creative Mornings. So that said, Sarah, I'd love for you to come introduce Richard briefly, and then we'll have you come on. While you're doing that, I'll get you. Hello again.
CreativeMornings. Thank you all for being here, as Lindsay mentioned. We are always, as she already said, looking for volunteers. I would love some help on the speaker team. I have a list all the time of people that I want to reach out to, but I also know that there are so many people in this community that I don't know, I've never met. There's jobs that I'm finding out about all the time, super creative people that are in our community that I know are out here. So if you know people that you want to hear from, send us an email, as Lindsay mentioned. Come help us on a team, be supportive, and even just come show up and, as Lindsay mentioned, tell a friend, train a girl this year. With that, I don't think Richard needs a ton of introduction, so I'm not going to be up here very long. But I'm sure he's made an impact on you, as he has on myself throughout the years, whether that's not through running Blue Note or Rose, of course being an integral part of the first Roots and Blues Festival, and then throughout those years, and then now with his new adventure at Cooper's. And as mentioned, Cooper's is my sanctuary, which is why Richard has actually been on our list of speakers that we wanted to have come. I think he could align himself to a plethora of themes. But Sanctuary was one for me that when I thought about where I have felt safe in the community, where I'd love to bring my son, I have a 10-year-old son who loves being out at the river, and my family, when we like to go biking and things like that. So that's the first place I thought of, and thinking of Richard's journey of running places like the Blue Note and Rose, and then now ending at Cooper's has been fascinating to me. So with that, I'd love to bring Richard up to tell us about his sanctuary. Typically we hold a couple minutes at the end for a Q&A. Richard has let me know he loves when people ask questions, so throughout that, if you do have a question while he's talking about something, he's okay with you interrupting and asking a question, but we will make sure, if there aren't that many questions, to hold some time at the end.
You should be able to just click through here. And we only ask that you use the mic so we can pick you up on
Sure.
the recording. So.
Well, Lindsay and Sarah, thank you very much for the warm introduction and the invite to speak to all these fine people in my large sanctuary I call Columbia. But anyway, I do really encourage folks here. I've had opportunities to speak to students on campus, and one of the things that I think is, I could stand up here and go on and on and on about, talk about the different things that I've done in this community and the great things that have happened to me in this community, but I'd rather be more interaction where you folks can ask questions about certain things that I've been involved in the community, or if you have questions just about all the dumb things I've done, because I've done a few of those too. But so please feel free to speak up and ask questions. I did come up with a list of bullet points to start off with, and this is just a list of things that I've sort of thought about over the years that I've been in Columbia. I did move here in 1975 from Scranton, Pennsylvania. I opened the Blue Note on August 1st of 1980, and 34 years of the Blue Note was plenty for me. I also had some health issues that I was advised by my wife and family to rethink what you're doing. So with that happening to me, but anyway, 34 years of the Blue Note were just absolutely wonderful years. The greatest experiences. I never thought, standing here today, that on August 1st, 1980, I would have come this far and been through so many different experiences, met so many great artists, met a lot of jerks too, but we're here to talk about fun people. But over those 34 years, we developed a lot of things. I started the Blue Note on the business loop, which some people may not know. I see a few people that may know here. I know Tony would know. We were down there for 10 years. It is the current home of Club Vogue, if anybody needs it. I always said I should have put a pole in the middle of the stage and I would have done better, but we were there until the fall or the winter of 1990, and in 1990 we moved to the venue downtown, which was a very, I never in a million years thought that I would be in that room. And for the 10 years that we owned the Blue Note down at the business loop, most of the time we called ourselves the bar without a car because the bank wouldn't lend us money to buy a car. Believe me, that's true. So I would walk by the theater, the Varsity Theater, and I would always peek in because there were little stores in there back in the early in the mid-70s when I moved here. And I would think, God, what a great place to have a music venue. But anyway, I thought there's no way that would happen. Anyway, I'm sitting at the bar at Bush's one afternoon, and I ran into one of my favorite attorneys. Excuse me. And he said, you should be in that room, Richard. And all of a sudden, 3 or 4 months later, I'm negotiating with the owner of the building to move into that building. And I had a huge support cast when I did move in that building. I can remember owners of other businesses, volunteers were in there helping us get the place ready for our first show, which was on St. Patrick's Day of 1990, and was Arlo Guthrie, which was an awesome opening. So anyway, from there, it was a big change in my life because now in the business loop, you get away with a lot of stuff. Not so much downtown. The police station was right around the corner. There was a lot of cops and stuff like that. But I mean, we were a pretty well-behaved group. But I think that the one thing about that was it brought an opportunity for me to step up my game. One of the hardest decisions I ever had to make in the many years that I've been here in Columbia was deciding to leave that wonderful room that have so many memories etched in my brain on the business loop. I can just picture that smoky, whiskey-smelling room and some of the best shows that we've ever had in that room. Anyway, the decision to move was imperative because if I wanted to develop what I was doing, if I wanted to make my situation better, if I wanted to make that situation better for Columbia, it was time to move to that venue. So that was what I did, and I moved there in 1990. Some people bailed out on me along the way, good, close friends, because they didn't like the change. And we all know in this room, some people just don't like change. And that was something that was really hard for me to deal with, but nonetheless, I mean, most people I'm still friends with, but they just said, I think I'm gonna move on, that kind of thing. I will remind anybody, if you have somebody really good working for you, take care of them. Make sure they're taken care of, because I've had many people move on over the years that some of them I wish I could have given them more money and that kind of thing, but the situation was the way it was. But anyway, so 1990 moved in there, had just all kinds of great things happening. We made some great improvements on the room. I started doing Summerfest downtown. I don't know if you folks remember those. We had to get a little permit from the city of Columbia, and we had a little pen set up on the 9th Street so people could drink beer in there, but everywhere else you couldn't. But I've also had some great experiences there. I'll just shoot through my bucket list here of things that if you guys want if you want to chime in on any of this stuff. At the top of my list is the perils of marketing, when I'm sure there's a few marketing people in here, I think they'd understand that. Poster wars and problems on campus. Okay, this is a real subject, and once again, I think Tony would know about that. I've been sued by several entities. Okay, but the big ones were the Blue Note in New York City, and they sued me twice. The first time, I was told to cease and desist using the name. I don't think I'm going to get, in 30 minutes, I'm going to get all this in, but I'll do my best. But please ask questions. But in 1993, I was delivered papers from the Blue Note in New York City to tell me to cease and desist using the name the Blue Note because they own the name, and that was the Blue Note in New York City. Well, as it turned out, I ran to I say this often, my legion of lawyers, and I talked to my Cullen, one of my original guys, and he said, well, let me check on that. So he did his homework, and he called me back up, and he said, hey, look, he goes, you registered the note, you registered the name, the Blue Note, with the Secretary of State in July of 1980. And I said, yeah, I remember that day because I was being a real jerk to the lady in the Secretary of State's office. Why am I doing this? Why am I registering in the fictitious name department of the Secretary of State? As it turned out, it was a huge deal. So he said, well, you registered the name in July of 1980. They didn't register the name until 1984, 85. So I'm going to write them a letter, and if you hear another word from them, they open themselves up to a lawsuit with you. And we sent the letter, and we didn't hear anything for a couple of years. And then another guy came banging on my door, delivering papers that I had to sign that I was being sued by the Blue Note in New York City once again. And this time it was because of my website, okay? I haven't even got to my bullet points yet. But the website thing was interesting because I had a guy that worked for me, and his name was Eric Lomo, and he and I are still very close, and he was just way ahead of the game when it came to internet and all that kind of stuff. And he said, Richard, I'm going to put you on the World Wide Web. I'm sitting there with one phone, and I'm like, what? The World Wide Web. People know all about the Blue Note all over the world. And I look at him and go ahead, Lomo, do it. And as it turned out, I mean, one of the things I will say about my years doing this is I really always listened to people around me, and I always took their advice, whether they were students, business people, city officials, police officers, lawyers. I really would take whatever they told me and make sure I used their information. So Lomo signed me up for the Blue Note, and he was smart enough to grab the name The Blue Note, Blue Dash Note, and Blue Slash Note. But anyway, the papers that were delivered to me obviously were telling me that I was violating advertising laws with the Blue Note in New York City, and therefore I had to cease and desist using the website. So whoever governs over that stepped in and said, well, Mr. King, we're going to put that name in limbo until we get this resolved. So, and I thought I was in big trouble, and I thought I was going to have to shut down. And this is once again where I called another one of my lawyer friends, and I said, so I think I'm in real trouble this time. And he said, well, bring all that information over to me and take a look, and I'll take a look at it and call me back. He goes, I've got some really good news for you. You know, remember when you were dusting off that insurance policy that I asked you to bring me? I said, yeah, what about it? He goes, well, you're covered. Your insurance will cover this lawsuit, which was shocking to me. So I called up my insurance man, who was a great guy, and he didn't believe me. I said, you can go ahead and look it over, but you're responsible. You have to cover me on this. And he came back and he said to me the next day, he goes, hey, we are responsible, so we have to take this. And I just said, so what do we do here? Do I use my own legal team here in Columbia, or do you provide a legal service for me? And he said, well, I'm pretty sure we provide legal for you, but it has to be upon your approval. And I just said, okay, well, that sounds fair. So he called me up the next day, and he gave me the name of the law firm. It was based in New York. And I called up one of my lawyers here in Columbia, and I said, hey, Bogdan, would you check out this Simpson, Thatcher, and Bartlett in New York City? Check the law firm out and see exactly what they're all about, and do I want to use them as my legal team? And he called me up a couple hours later, and he goes, King, you hit the jackpot. And I'm like, really? He goes, yeah, it's one of the top 10 law firms in the world. I was like, are you kidding me? He goes, no. And it was an amazing experience. It was just an amazing experience. There was like 20 of them that were covering my case. This case, made it to the Supreme Court, the New York State Supreme Court, Southern District, Manhattan. I should have brought some of the newspaper clippings about the whole thing. But as it turned out, it was a 3-judge New York Supreme Court that listened to the case. A friend of mine was in law school in New York at the time, and he went to the hearing, and he said the entire room was packed with lawyers because it was the first time a lawsuit like this came about.
Wow.
It was the Blue Note versus the Blue Note, is what the court thing said. As it turned out, after they had their hearings, which was great, the lawyers were unbelievable. They were really sweet. Lori Lesser, up until a few years ago, would send me a Christmas card every year. She was my liaison with this law firm. But the day before we're going in, they were thinking about flying me out there to have little old Richard King from Columbia, Missouri, going against this giant, the Blue Note, New York. And they said, well, we'll just go with this, And I said to him, his name is Kerry, and I said, hey, Kerry, so, what do you think is going to happen here? And he goes, this? He goes, I'm going to kick their ass, Richard. And I think these guys are all Harvard guys. And I said, oh, great. He goes, but I just want you to know something. If I was on their side, I'd be kicking your ass. Lawyer there. Anyway, the case went before them, and 6 to 8 months later, the decision came down that if they wanted to sue me, they would have to come, jurisdiction, they would have to come to Columbia, Missouri to sue me. And at that point, I had lawyers all over Boone County calling me up saying, "Can I have this case? Can I have this case? We don't want to dime for it." You know, as it turned out, they never came to Missouri to sue me. They did appeal it, and the appeal was thrown out. But what happened there was the Blue Note. I mean, we had already had a good reputation. This was in the 90s. But by that time, you're reading about us in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Chicago Daily Tribune, Dallas newspapers, LA papers, all major newspapers. I have people calling me that started a club called the Blue Note that had been getting sued by the Blue Note New York, and they didn't have a leg to stand on because I had all the legal, unknowingly to me, believe me, it wasn't my thinking ahead at all, okay? It was me getting forced to do these things. But as it turned out, this whole thing was favorable for me. So not only did I get to win this case, but I had every newspaper in the country call me and say, "Hey, we'd like to get," yes.
What would the value have been for all of that free advertising in those big
Well,
press?
the value to me was anybody that didn't know me in New York or LA was probably going to know about me. Now, any agent, because I worked with agents in LA, in New York all the time. The main places for back in those days was New York, LA, Nashville, and some Austin, Texas. So every single one of those guys were keenly aware of what was going on with me, and every single one of them would call me up and say, "Hey, those guys at the Blue Note New York are a bunch of assholes," you know, that kind of thing, you know. But I said, I don't know. I just want to get out of this. I just want to get out of this. So that was one thing, you know. It was. I mean, we had a really good reputation for the first 10, 11 years of our business anyway. But that certainly didn't hurt anything. So anyway, that happened, and I moved on. So that was in the 90s. Okay. Stuff like putting up posters, radio, internet, stuff like that were all phases of marketing that came to me. Posters. We would get up every single morning, go to the copy center next to the Heidelberg, make up 300 flyers, and I go on campus every morning with my dog, and I go in every building and poster. That was the only form of advertising we could really afford. In fact, those kiosks that are downtown in the streets of Columbia, they were put up because of myself and Phil having issues with, because we would put posters on telephone poles, which is against the law, I can tell you that. Put them on buildings that people didn't want them on, that's not a good thing. Putting them in buildings on campus was fun because the building managers would chase me out sometimes. But anyway, but that was the advertising that we could only afford. We couldn't, you know, we had people coming up and wanting us to buy radio contracts, and we're looking at them and going, "You want us to spend $10,000? There's just no way we're going to guarantee you that." So we did work with public radio here in Columbia. KCOU and KOPN were very, very influential in what we did. It was great to work with the students. I guess we can move these things along with some of these. And work with the students and also work with KOPN, and I can tell you that they had huge influences on everything that we did at the Blue Note. How do you do this? And I'll try and push it forward.
I don't knock down all the paintings. I think you can just click through.
Okay.
Like
That first picture, by the way, was myself and Phil Costello, the guy that I started the Blue Note with, and we have become good friends. Phil's now has his own management company and record label in Los Angeles. He and I are still really good friends, and he's very, very, very happy in the record world. And he left in 1985 because he wanted to be in the record world, and it was sad for me that he decided to move on. But I gave him whatever cash we had and said, "Adios, wish me luck, here we go." Anyway, that's an advertisement in one of the local fanzines in Columbia. Those are the bands we had, and that was, I'm sure that goes back to the 80s, down at the old Blue Note. This is, of course, the new location. Would push the arrow, is that it? Okay. That was Phil and I. These are some of the landmark events that happened to me. This is Johnny Cash. This was right after he was rejected by his record label, and American Records took him over. Rick Rubin produced that famous record Now that everybody knows about. And his story about that was his agent was a good friend of mine. I had done a lot of business with him. And I met him, or he called me up once. He goes, "Hey, you're going to Austin for South by Southwest," which was the Bible back in the day. And it still is, but it's just too crowded. And he goes, "Hey," he goes, "I got Johnny Cash down there, and I was wondering if you want to stop in and see how Johnny's doing." And I looked at him and I go, "Are you serious?" He goes, "Yeah, we're playing a small club, so I'm going to be on the guest list, So I get down there. It's on 6th Street in Austin. If anybody knows that's the 9th Street of Austin. And there I walk up to the door, and there's probably 1,000 people trying to get in the building, and I just kind of waded through them. On the guest list, Richard Kelly. And I went in, and the performance was incredible. It was Johnny Cash up close, a room not much bigger than this, and my agent friend Aaron slides up next to me halfway through the show, and he goes, "So what do you think? Would you be interested in bringing him to the Blue Note?" I think we might be able to pull something off here. So we had 2 shows the first time. He did 2 shows in one night. I met Johnny. I met June Carter was with him at the time also. So I will say when the bus pulled up and I was wanting to be there and be the promoter and stuff, and I opened the door and the bus driver says, "How you doing?" I said, "I'm the promoter, Richard. I just want to make sure everything's okay. What do you guys need?" And he said to me right off the bat, he goes, "You don't talk to me because you don't talk to Johnny." He goes, "June wears the pants in this group, so when she comes up, you talk to her." She was a delightful woman, but nonetheless, she was the one who was running the show. The other picture on the other side, of course, is Chuck Berry. And once again, I also had a great relationship, more of a personal relationship with Chuck, because when I booked Chuck, I actually got his phone number from his attorney, and I called Chuck directly. So I would call Chuck directly and say, "Hey." And Fran would sort of, make sure it was me and stuff like that. And that person on the piano there is the actual Johnny B. Good. So it's Johnny Johnson. This is one of my bookings that I was really proud of, because I had landed the Chuck Berry show. And Chuck, by the way, went and spoke at Rockbridge High School, Hickman High School. So he did that kind of stuff too. He was one of the teachers at Hickman, was also friends with his lawyer. But I called up Chuck and I said, "Hey, would you mind if I invited Johnny Johnson up?" And if you know the history of Johnny and Chuck, and you may not, they both fought for the naming rights to the song and ended up Johnny sued Chuck after this performance, of course. I have no idea how it ended up, but I get Johnny Johnson's phone number. I call him up, and he goes, "Well, if you give me a hotel for me and my wife Lucille, will pay me $500. I'm like, "I think I can do that, Johnny." So it was a real classic show, rock and roll show, and my experience with Chuck Berry was something I will never ever forget. He was the sweetest man in the world. So any stories you've ever heard about the guy, ditch him. He was a wonderful man. He went to schools. He worried about kids. The first time he got to Columbia, we were downtown, of course, and he goes, he looked at my guitar amps. He said, "You good, son?" I didn't want to pay the $1,000 fine, Chuck. But he said, "Hey, come on, they'll walk out here with me." We walked up to the end of the alley in Walnut, and he looked over at the courthouse, and he said, "Yeah," because I spent some time on that building. So he was jailed in Columbia for some kind of stupid little thing. But anyway, I could go on about that experience with that man. On the left, that was a Summerfest. One of the neighbors thought the music was too loud. It turned out it was a friend of mine who complained. And my good friend L.G. Patterson took that picture. You know L.G.? He always puts me in the place light. And on the right, believe it or not, is photographer Notley Hawkins in a punk rock band back in the day. So that's Notley, and I think the name of his band was Like a Horse. How are we doing on time, right?
Actually, we're really good. We're at
Okay.
9:22. You got lots
Okay,
of
good.
time.
Okay, good. These are two of my favorite folks in Columbia. That's Babe Martin with the guitar, passed away several years ago. I can't describe how much of a part of what we did. He was also very influential in the community, in the blues scene and the local music scene. Tony, once again, you pretty much knew Babe pretty well. As well, Forrest Rose, who was sort of my guiding light. He was a columnist for the Columbia Daily Tribune. He was a bluegrass musician. Forrest unfortunately passed away somewhere in Arizona playing bass with a bunch of bluegrass guys, just right then and there, just dropped in the middle of the set. It was in a house. It was at somebody's house. But those two people had so much. This photo is by John Trotter, who was a photographer for the Columbia Daily Tribune. He's done stuff for national everywhere. He's a wonderful person who lives in New York. Next one is my shrine, I call it. Excuse me. This is what my wife and some of her friends did with all these things I've collected from the Blue Note. So that picture on the left is the original posters that Phil and I would make. The one at the very top where the guy's sitting in the chair, he has a hairdryer on his head. It's the Violent Femmes. It was their first show in Columbia. The one in the middle, of course, obviously Uncle Tupelo, which we became very close friends with them, and Dinosaur Jr., whose my years have never been the same since Dinosaur. But if you look at all those posters out there, Johnny Cash, Branford Marsalis, they're just people, Robert Craig, these are people that had just wonderful people that I first-hand dealings with that were very, very, very appreciative of what I was doing. I mean, I can tell you that Robert Craig, his first record he put out, national record, they called me up and they said, "Would you do Robert?" And I loved the record. What's the name of the record? I should be able to think of that. But anyway, I loved the record. And they said, can you have it at the Blue Note? And this is at the old Blue Note. I said, sure. And they said, can you pay him $750? And I said, well, yeah, okay, that's a lot for me, but I can do it. You know, and the one thing about it was, 3 weeks later, he's on the Today Show, Good Morning America, everything with this record. It just blew up. And by the time he got to Columbia, Missouri, he literally walked in the room. It was pretty cold at that time of year. And he walked up, he said, "Is Richard here?" And I went up and I said, "Well, I'm Richard." And he just goes, "I just want to thank you for taking a chance with me." Which is, you know, who says that anymore? But those are the kind of experiences I have that I hopefully will reveal someday to other people. And of course, Snoop Dogg down there in the bottom. How could you not love that guy? This is a poster of the Roots and Blues Festival. This is actually after I owned it, but Brandy Carlisle had performed, Amanda Shires had performed when I had it. Who else is? Mavis Staples and I became just such good friends. She's such a sweetheart. On the left is the Blind Boys of Alabama, and that's how they walk on stage, which is pretty damn cool. And then at the very bottom is Nathaniel Rateliff, and he's in Hannibal, Missouri. Is it Hannibal? Or no, he's Herman, Missouri. And that person in the white shirt there in the middle is my son Patrick, who wanted to be there for the photo. Next one is one of my all-time favorites, is John Prine, and this is probably 6 months before John passed away. He, to me, was always one. In fact, both of these guys, Chuck Berry and John Prine, had so much influence on me, but so much. Their songwriting skills were second to none, and I can tell you that the success of the Roots and Blues Festival was because when John Prine said yes to me, everybody else said, if John Prine's going to be there, we'll be there. And that was the Avett Brothers, not June Carter. Yeah, it was that gave me cred, believe me. That is an autographed copy of a Chuck Berry 3-disc set. It's buried in my house somewhere. This is my new adventure, Cooper's Landing. I guess for the last few minutes I'll talk about that. Some of you may know when I bought it in 2019, I signed the papers in May of 2019, and 3 days later I got a call from the Army Corps of Engineers to get the hell out. The water was coming up. It turned out the water came up 33 feet. It was the most water that ever flowed down that river, including 1993, and many of you are too young to remember that. But according to the USGS folks, they said there was more water in 19 than there was in 1993. So it was a hell of a start for me, but I will say this, the property had some issues. They had some, what I would call, squatters on the property, and it was going to be difficult for me to figure out a way to ask these people to either start paying rent or they're going to have to leave. Well, Mother Nature took care of all that. They all had to get up and leave. Nothing ever got ugly. And I said to every one of them, I said, you're welcome to come back, but when you come back, we're going to have to do it a different way. So that on the left is just a picture I believe I took of somebody we know here in Columbia. In fact, that's John from pizza tree with his kids. Yep, it is. And on the right is the Joseph LaBarge, which is a wonderful little story. Barb and Roger are two of my dear friends and helped me. There's some flood stages. There's some flooding. That wall I'm so proud of there. If anybody remembers, that was just a big, dumpy kind of, everything was thrown over that thing. And a guy that I met at Murray's, and these are the weird things that happened to me. I'm sitting at the bar at Murray's one Saturday afternoon, and hey, you're the guy that bought Cooper's. I'm like, yeah, that's me. He goes, well, I want to do something down there. Mike would never let me, and I just walked right over to him. He said, give me your name and number. Let's talk. That's what he wanted to do. And then he wanted to develop all along the riverfront. And I just looked at him. I said, dude, whatever you want to do, let's just continue to do it. That was the flood stage early on in 2019 that's up there. That is the actual flood, okay? And on the left is a look upriver. We're looking north. That little brick thing on the wall, the little brick thing is where the water well is, and that was well underwater. In the middle, that is the worst it ever got, is that high. And it stayed up for a really long time. On the right is all the nutty people that do Peddler's Jamboree. Yes,
I think I'm playing that show.
you probably were playing that. Would you agree with me? They're nuts. It was a downpour like I've never seen, and not one of them even cared about it. They just sat there, drank their beer, listened to music, and had a great time. It was an awesome experience. It was the first year that they actually came through Cooper's, because usually they go to Boonville. We were happy to have them, but they're all nuts. On the left is Steve and Melanie. They are Missouri River Relief, and I suggest to you, Sarah, if you never need speakers, you should bring them in. They do so much for this community. They've done so much for me when Cooper's flooded. They were there with boats, pumps, shovels, volunteers to help out. And I can never thank them enough. I'm a big supporter of them both financially and social media, everything, because they do wonderful things. Because on the right is the Missouri River Relief Days, or Missouri River Days, which they bring every single 4th grade class in the public schools in this area. They bring them down there by bus, and they will take them on a ride up the river, a hike on the trail. They'll have a little art studio there that local artists would run, and then they would also have the fishery and wildlife folks with all kinds of displays for kids, 4th grade. When this happened the first year I owned it, the first thing I could do down there after the flood, it was in September of 2019, and when I saw this happening, when I saw these kids getting off the buses, I just said to myself, this place is gonna work. This is gonna work. These are the things that need to be done down there. And so I owe so much to the Missouri River Relief people, and like I said, I'm a big supporter, but if you ever get a chance, just keep an eye out for the Missouri River Days. It's just really cool.
Well, and you can volunteer for them too, because Woodruff's volunteered a day with them, and I know Shannon was there. And the stuff that you will find along the Missouri River is, for all of us who are saying we love our nature and everything, give back and go do a volunteer day, because we have a lot of shit along the river that is really crappy. So
you did a river cleanup?
We did a river cleanup, Woodruff, yeah.
That is unbelievable. They'll have maybe 100 volunteers. They'll have a giant dumpster on the property. They'll have all their boats on the river, and they'll have tons of volunteers. And the things they bring back is you can't imagine. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, they boat you to a location along the river, and they drop you off, and they say they'll be back at a certain time.
Yeah, they come back and you kind of get off and you're like, is this okay? Am I gonna be okay?
Here's the art studio, which I believe I took these pictures. It was just a gas to watch these kids sitting there painting their image of the Missouri River, which was just awesome. This is the Missouri River Relief boat on the left. That's our glamping tent there on the right. Like that, if you ever want to get away. It's a wonderful little spot. It really is nice. The first time I showed it to a couple that were coming down to get away for a night, And we had just put the new one in, and I opened up, I was laying down, I opened it up, and I just go, holy shit, oh, I'm sorry. This is really nice. Full bed in there, furniture.
Yeah, there's like a little nightstand.
It's a pretty cool little setup, and the view in the morning, or even at night, is just incredible. This is one of our music nights, and these photos speak volumes. It's just a wonderful scene. The sunsets everybody is familiar with. I will say this, the sunsets are awesome, but going down there at 9 o'clock in the morning with your cup of coffee or whatever, when nobody's there, and you just hear the birds chirping and the river gurgling and the fish jumping, and it's really, really quite your moment of zen, I guarantee you.
Is that better than walking into the Blue Note at 7 a.m.?
Oh my God. You know, it's funny because I didn't really get that until after the flood and all that, and I was down there trying to get everything figured out, and I was like, oh my God, this is so peaceful. This is so I would literally sit there and goof off for a half hour. Like, oh wait, I gotta get back to work here. There's my lovely wall, and that little corner booth there, we completely renovated it this past fall, so it's all looking new. That's my manager, Mike, who is turned out to be a godsend to me. He's a wonderful man, works really hard, and he's very, very enthusiastic about all the things we're doing down there. I'm really lucky to have him, and I think there's a person in this room that helped me land that person. But thanks, Mark. Oh, is that it? Oh, that's it. So that's the end. So hey, right now I'll give you an update on what we're doing down there. So this. Actually, this month I'm hoping to have all the electric on the property upgraded to FEMA standards to make our friends happy in that building right over there. And then also we have ordered a new septic system, which we're also trying to get in the ground this winter. I'll keep my fingers crossed on that one. But the point about the septic system is once I get that in the ground, then you can start using the bathrooms in the store. And I will be able to move forward with putting bathrooms and showers down there because when you have campers and bikers and all kinds of people and you have the Missouri 340, they need a place to take a shower, they need a clean place to bathe and stuff like that. So I know, and that was the number one thing on my list when I took the place over, but a little thing like a flood jumped in there and then a pandemic. So it kind of really screwed everything up. So, but I want to get those things in, continuing to work on the grounds. We're going to put up a hammock camping spot on the grounds. Working with local forestry people about planting a bunch more trees down there. Continuing to upgrade the riverbank. And I mean, I know I will never keep the river off the landing, but for now, I wanted to make it a place where people like yourself will feel comfortable. You would feel comfortable bringing your moms and dads down there or your kids down there. That was the goal, and it really became realistic to me when I saw the Missouri River Days and all the grade school kids. I go, this is the best advertising campaign I could ever ask for. They're gonna want their mom and dad to bring them back down. That was my marketing mind, you know. But anyway, anybody have any questions about any of this so far? Yeah.
Got anybody in New York City with the same name?
What's that?
So you got anybody in New York City with the same name?
Well, there is a Cooper's Landing. There is a Cooper's Landing in Alaska, and so there are people like we have online camping. So you don't call up and make a reservations. We just send you to our online thing, and you make a reservation. Well, this couple made a reservation, and they thought it was the one in Alaska. So they called up and said, "Can we cancel?" We go, "Well, it's a week out." And they go, "But we thought it was Alaska." Okay, we'll let you go.
On the same topic, what was your initial connection with the name, the Blue Note, after all that?
Well, to be honest with you, Phil and I went round and round in 1980. And we had all kinds of names, and I grew up in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and I went to Bishop Hamlin High School, which is in downtown Scranton, and I walked by a place called the Blue Note every single day, and it was an old man bar, guys in there drinking their quarter drafts. But it was to me, that was with the name, but also we wanted to be a musical venue. We wanted to make sure that it was understood that this was about music. And you know, we were the smartest guys in the world in 1980. We thought we were the smartest guys. Phil was really smart. He got the hell out in 1985. But so that was how the name. We back and forth. We went and we just said, let's just do this. And I know it's a jazz club in New York and stuff like that. But that's where it all originated.
What led you to purchasing Cooper's Landing and making that jump?
Well, I won't blame anybody in this room, but I had sold the Blue Note. I was out of the Blue Note, and I was getting out of Roots and Blues. I should say something about Betsy Ferris, who was my director at Roots and Blues, and I don't know if any of you guys knew her, but she was the most incredible woman that I ever worked with when it came to doing stuff like that. And she loved every minute of her job. I would get emails from her, and I would look at the timestamp. It was 4 o'clock in the morning. But the impetus to buy Cooper's, well, the owner kept bugging me about he wanted to sell it, and I told him I had a non-compete clause with the owners of the Blue Note, so I couldn't do any business in Columbia for 4 years. And the day that thing expired, he called me up and he says, "Now, what'd you think about it?" And then I got a little push from my son Nick, who was here in the audience, and he goes down there with his buddies, and they sit up in the Orazio's property and say, "Dad, it's just really cool down there." So those were the two of the things. And to be honest with you, I had been retired for 4 or 5 years, and you can only play so much golf, you can only do so many things, and I thought, this will keep me busy. And then it flooded. So I think we weathered it, and I think if there's anything you get from what I'm here talking about today, it's just you really need to persevere. You need to just sometimes. I noticed in the intro there's hard work involved. I always say there's luck involved. I always say there's so many people in this community, and I really mean that. There's people sitting in this room that have done so much for me, helped me along the way, and I am so appreciative of all that. Any other questions? Yeah, Joy.
So going to our theme of sanctuary, I mean, and the Blue Note and Roots and Blues, and I mean, you didn't, just from hearing your story today, we know that there probably wasn't much of a sanctuary then, but how has that maybe changed? Like, what was your sanctuary then? What is it now with Cooper's and everything?
Well, I mean, Columbia has really been my sanctuary, and I mean, I moved here not liking the Midwest, coming from out east, and it didn't take me much longer than a year to realize how beautiful, how great the city was, the people that lived in the city, and the opportunities that they offered. And I was offered an opportunity that is just incredible. Not everybody gets that opportunity. And so my new sanctuary is Cooper's. There's no question about it. I love what I'm doing. I'm having so much fun doing what I do. I have a great manager, so I don't have to spend all my time down there. But and I'm real serious about 9 o'clock in the morning, 8 o'clock in the morning down there, sitting on that river. It's really is a sanctuary for me. It just is over the years, I'm getting a little older. I'm a little bit more in control of my emotions and stuff. And I just find it to be one of the, just sitting around hanging out with people to me is a great part of it. And that's the other thing about Cooper's is because it's more of a local, it's more of a regional thing. And not only is it because of the people that come down there, but the musicians and artists that I deal with are all local. And I've had experience with them, but I wasn't able to deliver like I could have at the Blue Note because of, this guy had to play this and this. So it's an opportunity for me to reconnect in a much stronger fashion with the community that made, put me where I am today. It's artists, even like people at the city, not so much the county, but the people like Missouri River Relief are just, they are wonderful people. The people in the United States Geological Services, the Colombian people, they are unbelievable people. The Conservation Department of Natural Resources have been the most welcoming, helpful people that I thought would be this massive bureaucracy that wouldn't want to do anything to help me. And as I find out, these people are there to help you. And when when I was getting the well inspected, it was the Department of Natural Resources that walked me through it. When I submitted plans for the septic system, which is a really big deal for me, the engineers at DNR were awesome. They were like, this is, and I was told that the engineers at DNR would love what I'm gonna do. And the response, so to talk to this woman, Leah Sue at DNR, was just so, she was just like, this is great. She goes, but I'm worried about the septic versus the well. And I said, well, Leah Sue, you can call the people over at the well because I just got done with them. And she said, oh, great, I'll call Frank or whatever his name. Calls me back 3 days later, says, we're all good, you're good to go. So, the sanctuary for me is kind of a big sanctuary. But right now, that is everything is in that. Yes?
I know that you mentioned you came here, I forget the year that you mentioned, 80s?
I came here in 1975.
Okay, and that's, I guess, what I want to, how did you and Phil connect? And then how did you end up in Columbia, Missouri? Because I know you said you weren't fond of the Midwest, so I'm just curious, what?
This is a true story. Kevin Walsh, who some folks know in this room, he ran Street Side, and he's just crazy, but he and I were very close friends growing up in Scranton. And we listened to music together, we loved music, and he came here to do graduate work at the University of Missouri. And I figured that my parents had just about enough of me living at home. I had finished up my associate degree, and I told them, I said, I don't want to waste my money, my time, your time. I don't want to be back in school. I got to figure stuff out. So I saved money, and the intention was, and this is the truth, to stop in and visit Kevin. I had 2 friends with me, and then it was on to California, where I was going to seek fame and fortune. I never got off the couch at Kevin's apartment, and I started meeting people, and I really wasn't crazy about Columbia for my first year, and I'll be honest with you. I didn't feel like I fit in, and everybody knows that feeling when they go to a new place. But after easily about a year, there was Gladstone's, which Tony's probably the only one in this room who knows about that. It was a music venue north of town that is now an apartment complex. But we would get involved in that. We go shows all the time. And Phil and I gravitated, and he worked for me. I was a manager of the Heidelberg, my first job. He worked for me at the Heidelberg for a while. But then we got to be really good friends. And we decided we were the smartest guys in Columbia, in the world. We're going to open a club, and we're going to make gobs of money. And he got smart and left in '85. That was kind of how we met, and Phil and I are still very close. He's had a wonderful career in the music industry out in LA. He went from here to Chicago to Los Angeles. And, we were, up until a few years ago, pandemic and all that, we would vacation together in nice warm places with our family, with our wives and kids. And it's still, I learned so much from him. And, it was funny when he came back in 1990. It was the 10-year anniversary of the Blue Note. We had a big celebration at the new venue. And he looked at me, he goes, the best thing that ever happened to you was me leaving, Richard. I said, yeah, that's right, Phil. But, and one of the other things I always emphasize when you're doing things like this is the relationships that I've built over the year. And I would say to people, even if you want to just kill that guy, don't burn the bridge, just move on. And somewhere along the line, that person's going to gravitate back to you, and it's going to be like, oh, wow, it's you again, and things can work out. And that has been my entire life. I honestly, anytime an agent slammed the phone on me or I slammed the phone on an agent, we would call each other back in a couple hours and say, well, that was pretty stupid. So anyway, any other questions? Yeah, shit.
Did you do any music booking before you started the Blue Note, or did you have to figure out how that system works? Just, okay, we're gonna do a music venue. Wonder who I'd call.
The only booking that we did was when we lived at 1315 Wilson, and we invited Jerome Wheeler and the Catnip Mouse Band to play on on the street, on Lee Street, back in 1976 or 77. That was the one and only booking. We did work at where the Broadway Hotel is. It was a Sheridan back in the day. We were in charge of the bar there towards the end, and we booked the Hell Band in there, which was 4 shows. But that was it on experience. Phil did work at the Brief Encounter before, that was what the Brief Encounter was the building the Blue Note was in, was the business in the Blue Note before we changed the name and everything. So he had a little experience with that, but we just know we winged it. It's amazing how we figured certain things out, and I do emphasize relationships, but one thing that, when bands show up, they're on the road, and you're their thing for the next 10, 12 hours, so being nice and giving them beer and water and soda and dinner, and treating them like, even if there's nobody there, which happened a lot. But the one thing that we did notice is that when those bands left, they would say, those guys are good guys, they took care of us. So when this, and this happened, I'm telling you, REM was the 1980, 40 people showed up. A friend of mine was telling me a story that REM played in Kansas City on one of their last tours, and it was 20,000 seat thing, and Michael Stipe came out and he goes, wow, he goes, Missouri. He goes, God, I remember our first time in Missouri. It was the Blue Notes in Columbia. And of course my friend was there and he said the whole place went crazy. And then Stipe goes, yeah, like any of you were there. And there was 40 people there. The next time there was 300 people there, and the next time they said, adios, Richard. We're doing bigger rooms. But those kind of things happen all the time. Violent Femmes, Red Hot Chili Peppers, REM, Meat Puppets, Dinosaur Jr. There's just so many. Husker Du, if you know your punk rock, Husker Du ended at the Blue Note at the old Blue Note in December of, what was it, 2008 or 9. That was an unbelievable experience because I did everything I was supposed to do, and they wanted a big monitor rig, and they wanted all kinds of, hospitality, and I got everything for them. And Bob Mould is the lead singer and songwriter for Husker Du. He was just walking around the club, acting kind of nervous. He's like, how do you think we're gonna do, Richard? And I said, well, Bob, it's finals week at the zoo. This is the only day we could do. It is a little chilly outside, but I think we'll do okay, And he left, and the band shows up, and there was no drummer. 15 minutes before this was supposed to go on, and the drummer was Grant Hart, and Grant Hart comes rolling in right when they were supposed to go on, did their set, jumped in a car with a friend, and disappeared into the night, and that was the last show. So as Bob Mould describes it, all went down the toilet in Columbia, Missouri. Which, at first the agent called me up and started screaming at me, like, what did you do? And that was a hang up. And he called me back, he goes, you had nothing to do with it. I go, yeah, I think I did everything I was supposed to do. So it turned out Grant had a drug problem, and he was hanging out with a drug friend, and he just couldn't deal with the reality. There's other interpersonal things going on with the band. But the crazy thing about that is the next week, I was flying back home to visit my family for Christmas. It was right before Christmas. And I remember going to New York to meet my agent friends and, see what's going on. And they took me to a Christmas party in downtown Manhattan, and a place called Acme downstairs. And I'll never forget, I went down there with these guys. And we're in there, and all my favorite New York musicians are at this thing. It's a really cool experience for me, And I'm like Goonie, like the way I'm acting. But halfway through the night, in walks Grant Hart. And that was the first sighting of Grant Hart since he walked out of the Blue Note. And one of the agents who was responsible for Husker Du, he just elbows me and just goes, Jesus, Richard, look who just walked in. And I go, what? He goes, it's Grant. There he is, he just walked in. And it was, I didn't, it was way out of my world, but I was like, wow. And, people just kind of stood back and didn't say anything. And at the time, people figured out that he had a horrible drug problem. And when you have a horrible drug problem, you may not know that you have to have that next thing. And the guy he was with had a lot of money, and he kept Grant happy. So, Mark.
So these are the kind of stories that I love hearing from you and others that have worked at the Blue Note at the time. I had the pleasure of working there for 25 years, and I had a lot of interactions with artists. I mean, I have stories from, Tommy Lee, Salt and Pepper, even Keanu Reeves, for God's sake. But it's like, have you had any consideration to writing like a memoir or working with someone? Because I would love to hear all these stories. I mean, I'm sure there's some limit you have to, draw that line of what you can tell, but it'd just be so fascinating.
Well, many of these stories have been documented. When we first originally started doing the book project, and it was a friend that lived here at Columbia, and she did all the recordings of interviews with Phil and myself. And so she has a lot of this, we have a lot of this on tape, and but there's much more. But unfortunately, for that person, life got in the way. And she had to move on, and she sent me everything. I have everything saved. And to be honest with you, I have to make sure it's the right, I'm dying to do it. I think it's important. It's not, and I try to tell you, it's not anything to do with me, but I think that the impact that this had on Columbia was more so, I didn't realize it until after I sold the Blue Note, and people would come up to me and say, well, I did this at the Blue Note, I did that, and, that kind of thing, And I just started thinking, I go, man, I got married, because of the Blue Note, my wife, I met her there, all kinds of stories like that. So we have a bunch of them documented, but not all. I just did a podcast. Sarah, I don't know if you listened. And it does talk about a lot of the stuff that I've talked about today, about the early days, And the one thing about that is, before I get too old, these things are just etched in my brain. I will never forget some of those scenes at the old Blue Note, certainly some of those scenes at the Blue Note, getting that ticket from the police officer that night. I mean, those are things that I will never forget, and I still have the story, and I still have a pretty good memory. And I'll bring in Kevin Walsh, and I'll bring in Phil Costello, and certain other people that were involved. But I don't have anything planned. We were talking about trying to do podcasts with all these kind of things, and just taking, several years at a time. But it is crazy. It is really amazing stuff, and to be standing here saying that I have a lot to do with that is just kind of, crazy. Who'd have thought? One other thing, when we had the 25th anniversary of the Blue Note, we had it down here in Mojo's, and my entire family, I have 7 brothers and sisters, and my mom came out, and Chuck Graham, who also was a good friend of mine, was a state senator at the time, and he got everybody into the room at Mojo's, and he said, we're going to make a presentation to Richard, and it was something like, an official document framed, the Missouri State Senate, and blah blah blah, signed by the governor, like Richard King, we honor you on this day of the Blue Note, blah blah blah, that kind of stuff, And my mom is in the front row, okay, and she elbows my brother, and she goes, "Can you believe they're doing this for Richard?" Oh, it was so wonderful. Best line I've ever heard. But anyway, I don't know if I'm out of time, but if
No,
we
you guys.
probably have time for one more question.
Okay. Yeah, Tony.
Yeah, actually, a couple of quick questions. One is, I listened to the podcast, and I was really intrigued by the stories of the help you got from the music community in Springfield, where I grew up.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I really struck me in that podcast, and you alluded to it earlier today, was about change, how when change comes, a lot of people see it as a problem and treat it as a problem, but you look at change as an opportunity. And I am curious of where did that come from in your upbringing or in your experiences where you that viewpoint?
I think honestly, the first real encounter I had with change, moving here was a big change, things like that, but I think the real, change experience to me was when I had to make a decision about moving the Blue Note, because it was going to be a significant change. It was going to be a big step up in what I do in my life. It was going to be serious money that I wasn't, I was barely getting loans from banks back in those days. I mean, seriously, they would not lend you money. And for good reason. I have no problem with that. But I can remember, and you know, I would have this debate in my brain every single day. And the last thought before I said goodnight in bed was, you have to do this. You have to do it. If you want to continue what you're doing, and if you want to make it better, you have to do this. And that was opportunity. And I am an opportunist. I've had people create opportunities for me, and I'd go, whoa, really? Okay, I'll do this. So that was probably the first real serious, you know, I mean, at the old Blue Note, I always, after a while I realized I needed to make it better, but when I got in that building up there, I knew I had to make it better. I knew I had to do things that, you know, not just the fact that I was downtown, but I was wanting all kinds of people to feel welcome there. Not just the punk rock crowd, not just the blues crowd, not just the hipster crowd, whatever. We wanted all people to feel welcome there. So that was where, but I mean, that was a significant point in my life where my life took a significant change, but I still put posters up every morning with my dog on campus. So I didn't change other than I knew that this had happened.
Well, thank you, Richard, for your time.
Hey, thank you.